The protagonist, a young man named existed in a world where external success masked profound internal suffering. Universally recognized as a top-tier student, he was the recipient of constant praise and admiration from his teachers and peers. However, this facade of academic excellence concealed a brutal and silent private hell. His home life was a relentless cycle of pressure and abuse, dominated by a father who viewed him not as a son, but as a flawless test-taking machine. The slightest mistake, the most minor deviation from perfection, was met with physical violence, crushing spirit under the immense weight of impossible expectations. This constant psychological and physical torment pushed him to the very brink of an emotional breakdown, leaving him feeling hollow and utterly broken inside. A desperate attempt to escape this oppressive environment led to his transfer to a new high school, an institution notorious throughout the district for its culture of violence and its population of troubled, aggressive students. It was within these chaotic and intimidating halls that unexpectedly began to discover the faint, unfamiliar stirrings of what it truly meant to feel alive. On his very first day, a teacher issued a warning to the class, explicitly instructing the other students not to harass the new transfer, with a particular emphasis directed toward an individual named Hong Il. Hong Il was widely known as a notorious troublemaker, a bully who derived pleasure from targeting and intimidating weaker students. Although Hong Il felt an immediate visceral dislike for quiet, aloof demeanor, which he interpreted as condescension, he initially restrained himself, adhering to the teacher's directive. This fragile truce was shattered on the day Hong Il accidentally knocked Walkman to the floor. Who generally preferred to avoid conflict, found himself triggered by Hong Il's aggressive posture. The bully's demeanor was a painful echo of his father's own domineering authority, and something deep within finally snapped. He shouted in defiance, a raw, unexpected sound that caused the entire classroom to freeze in stunned silence. No one had anticipated that the quiet, studious new arrival would possess the courage to openly challenge the class bully. Humiliated by this public defiance, Hong Il violently kicked and demanded to know if he was insane. Did not retaliate physically, still hopping to avoid escalating the situation, but Hong Il had no intention of letting the matter drop. After the school day ended, Hong Il and his gang intercepted blocking his path home. Even though offered an apology in an attempt to de-escalate, Hong Il demanded further compensation for his wounded pride. He forcibly saved his own phone number into mobile, issuing a tyrannical command. Was to reply to his messages within 10 seconds or face severe consequences. Responded not with submission but with a glare of pure contempt before walking away. The following morning, a text arrived from Hong Il, but was simultaneously enduring a torrent of verbal abuse from his father and missed the message. By the time he reached school, the demand had completely slipped his mind, an oversight that sent Hong Il into a furious rage. As punishment, Hong Il snatched headphones and confiscated his Walkman. This object, however, held a significance far beyond that of a simple music player for A newfound resolve solidified within him, and he stood his ground, firmly demanding its return. Hong Il responded with another brutal kick, arrogantly declaring that the Walkman now belonged to him. When reached for it again, Hong Il hurled the device to the ground and stomped on it violently. He then advanced on mockingly poking his forehead and unleashing a stream of insults. This final act of humiliation struck a deep, resonant chord of pain within Consumed by a blinding rage, he finally fought back, throwing a punch with such force that it sent Hong Il crashing to the floor, shocking every onlooker. A wild, frantic brawl ensued. Fought with a feral intensity, clinging to Hong Il and slamming him against the hard floor. After overpowering the bully, he retrieved his damaged Walkman, only for Hong Il to attempt a cowardly attack from behind. Dodged with surprising speed and landed 2 devastating punches that left Hong Il incapacitated and unable to stand. A classmate named Uni, who had been observing the entire altercation from the sidelines, found himself unexpectedly impressed by the transfer student's hidden ferocity. As if nothing of consequence had occurred, simply put his headphones back on and returned to his studies. Later, reflecting on the event, he experienced a rare, genuine smile. The brutal fight had felt like a crack of light piercing the darkness of his existence, allowing him, for the first time, to take a full, unburdened breath. The profound importance of the Walkman was rooted in deep personal tragedy. It had been the most treasured possession of late older brother. His brother had once imparted a piece of wisdom that held close, that music should not merely be heard with the ears but felt with the entire heart. To the two brothers, the rhythm and pulse of music were akin to the very breath of life, a tangible proof of their own existence. This was the reason constantly listened to music, even using it as a backdrop to his acts of self-harm, a desperate method to release the immense pressure building inside him. The following day at school, Hong-il attempted to reassert dominance with a sharp slap to the back of Um's head, accompanied by a vague threat. Uni, now taking a friendly interest, kindly warned that another student, a boy named Sheng-jun who fancied himself the unofficial king of the freshmen due to his background in boxing, would likely be seeking him out. Unappreciative of the warning, coldly told Uni to mind his own business. Just as predicted, Sheng-jun soon arrived to confront tried to explain the circumstances of the previous day's fight, but Sheng-jun responded by punching him hard and ordering him to kneel in submission. While was not a person who sought out physical altercations, he had discovered that he was no longer afraid of them. The immediate confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of a teacher, causing the boys to scatter. Believed the issue was resolved, but after school he discovered that his Walkman was missing from his bag. Hong-il promptly called, instructing him to come to a designated location if he ever wanted to see the Walkman again. Rushed to the spot while Uni, following him, warned that he would be badly beaten and advised that to win against a boxer, he needed to get in close, stick to him, and turn the fight into a messy, grappling brawl on the ground. Upon arrival, Sheng-jun declared that the Walkman would only be returned if could defeat him in a fight. Reluctant to engage, was given no choice as Sheng-jun began throwing a relentless series of merciless punches. Finally, fighting spirit ignited, and he resolved to end the conflict swiftly. Despite his determination, he was initially outmatched by the trained boxer. However, demonstrating a keen analytical intelligence reminiscent of a strategic fighter, carefully studied Sheng-jun's attack patterns. He feigned a move, created an opening, and landed a clean, surprising punch. Enraged, Sheng-jun unleashed a violent beating. It was then that remembered Uni's advice. He closed the distance, clung tightly to Sheng-jun, and deliberately rolled down a flight of stairs with him. Rising first from the tangle of limbs, ended the fight with a single, decisive punch, leaving Sheng-jun unable to continue. He had secured a victory in the most unexpected way, earning non-stop praise from a thrilled Uni, who expressed his hatred for bullies and his belief in latent fighting potential. A text from his father forced to take measures to conceal the fight. To hide his injuries, he swapped his torn clothes with Uni and used BB cream to cover the bruises on his face. When he arrived at his private academy, he witnessed his father publicly berating the instructors over a perceived decline in grades. To cope with the stress of this scene, found himself mentally replaying the fight, and with a sense of disturbing clarity, he realized he was beginning to enjoy the adrenaline rush it provided. The repercussions of his victory continued to ripple outward. A senior bully from the 11th grade named Jae-huk felt humiliated that Sheng-jun had been defeated by a dumb nerd. He brutally punished Sheng-jun and his friends, delivering an ultimatum: they were to smash the transfer student's head with a brick or face dire consequences themselves. After school, Uni followed like a protective shadow, chattering about mundane things like removing bloodstains from clothing, which pointedly ignored. Sheng-jun, conflicted and unwilling to resort to such a vicious act, was nonetheless coerced by the senior's threats. In a moment of pressured desperation, he struck on the head with a flimsy stick. Uni panicked and tried to call the police, but even in his dazed state, stopped him, insisting that Sheng-jun had not truly intended to cause serious harm before promptly losing consciousness. He awoke in a sterile hospital bed and immediately tried to leave, only to encounter his parents at the doorway. Terrified of his father's punishment, remained silent. Uni, stepping in, fabricated a story about falling down a flight of stairs. Instead of expressing concern or gratitude, father immediately inquired about his class ranking, reinforcing his view that his son was only permitted to associate with top academic performers. For mother, the hospital setting was a painful trigger, evoking the memory of years past when her elder son was also taken away in an ambulance, never to return. Racked with guilt and worry, Sheng-jun decided to visit at the hospital. He accidentally bumped into mother, who mistakenly assumed he was a concerned friend and thanked him for coming. Noticing the bruises on his face, she gently advised him to use ointment, a simple act of kindness that only deepened Sheng-jun's feelings of shame and remorse. He offered a hurried apology and fled the scene. Back at home, mother tried to bridge the emotional chasm that had formed between them, but remained withdrawn and uncommunicative. After only a single night of rest, returned to school. He harbored no intention of seeking revenge against Sheng-jun and simply expressed his hope that the conflict was over. Shang Jun, equally weary of the fighting, offered no argument but issued a final warning against future arrogance. However, the senior bully Jai Huk was not ready to let the matter rest. He decided to confront this intriguing new transfer student personally. Met his gaze with a silent, unwavering stare. His lack of response infuriated Jai Huk, who then threatened Uni, demanding that present himself on the school rooftop at noon, or else make life a living hell for everyone until graduation. Cornered, had no choice but to appear. He initially apologized to Jai Huk and even promised future compliance with Shang Jun's demands. Dissatisfied with this submission, Jai Huk ordered Shang Jun to demonstrate his boxing combinations on In a pivotal moment of defiance, Shang Jun remained silent and immobile. Humiliated, Jai Huk resorted to punishing Shang Jun with a wooden sword to reassert his authority over the freshman. Witnessing this, could no longer stand by. He threw the sword aside and launched a fierce, unexpected attack on the senior. Jai Huk initially gained the upper hand by reclaiming the wooden sword, using his skill to overwhelm and leave him defenseless. Just as was on the verge of losing consciousness, Shang Jun intervened, kicking Jai Huk from behind. As Jai Huk shouted in disbelief at this betrayal, realized the key to victory was to disarm his opponent. He endured the painful blows to seize the wooden sword, and in a stunning reversal, used a combination of moves he had observed from Shang Jun to finally defeat the arrogant senior. In that moment, was flooded with an overwhelming sense of relief and dark satisfaction. Shang Jun, inspired by the event, resolved to reform and abandon his violent ways. Jai Huk, who had moments earlier been the epitome of arrogance, was now reduced to nervously seeking help from a junior. As struggled to climb the stairs, another student, Seong Sik, a notorious bully from the 12th grade, offered a deceptively kind hand, even behaving politely in front of a teacher. Once they reached the classroom, Seong Sik's true colors emerged as he brazenly demanded money from to buy a Coke. Confused but compliant, handed over the cash. Later at his tutoring academy, found himself unable to concentrate, his mind continually drifting back to the thrill of the fight, which resulted in a poor test performance and a scolding from his instructor. As he pondered new ways to relieve his pent-up stress, he noticed Seong Sik waiting for him at the door. A slight smile touched lips as he recognized the senior bully. He directly challenged Seong Sik to a fight on the spot, a proposal that was met with mocking laughter and accusations of insanity. The confrontation was cut short by the sudden arrival of father, who delivered a stern lecture about obtaining lasting power through academic diligence, warning his son against becoming intoxicated with the temporary power of thugs. Listened in silence, his mind already drifting back to school, where he knew far more compelling and interesting challenges awaited. The next day, Uni cautioned to avoid further fights until he was fully healed, or he would surely lose. Seong Sik, however, had no intention of granting any respite. He approached with an offer to join his circle, promising a position as one of the most feared individuals in the school. He framed it as an opportunity for power and privilege, but scoffed, accurately labeling it as mere thuggery. An awkward laugh from Seong Sik quickly turned aggressive as he emptied an entire bottle of Coke over head. Was prepared to retaliate immediately, but Uni signaled for him to exercise restraint. Perceiving this as timidity, Seong Sik hurled further insults before departing. During a weekend family gathering for his grandfather's birthday, was the only grandchild who received a warm welcome, likely because he was seen as the sole heir to the family fortune. His grandfather pressured him to transfer back to his former elite school and claw his way to the top of the food chain there. However, firmly refused. Despite the chaos and violence, his current school was the first place that had ever made him feel truly alive. In a dazed state under the blazing sun, thought he saw a vision of his deceased brother. Walking trance-like toward the apparition, he accidentally fell into a swimming pool and had to be rescued by his father. A tense family argument erupted, with his mother blaming the grandfather for his harshness, and the grandfather retorting that both parents were weak and had ruined life. Overwhelmed, wept silent tears in the suffocating atmosphere. The following day, he channeled all his frustration and shame into a direct confrontation with Seong Sik. He stormed into the classroom, forcibly made Seong Sik drink Coke in the same humiliating manner he had endured, and hurled the empty bottle back at him. Seong Sik responded with wild laughter and issued a challenge to settle the score in the band room. Arrived as promised, and Seong Sik gave him a 10-second ultimatum: join him or be destroyed. Chose to fight, stating he needed to finish quickly to return to his studies. A fierce battle erupted. Fought with all his strength but was quickly overpowered and pinned, with Seong Sik choking him into unconsciousness. As he was blacking out, a traumatic memory surfaced of his own brother using the same chokehold on him years before. Seong Sik, now exhilarated, then turned his attention to Uni. Though Uni was naturally cowardly, he despised public humiliation. He raised his fists ready to defend himself. Miraculously, regained consciousness at that moment. He warned Seong-sik that if he choked him again, he would be killed. Dismissing the threat, Seong-sik attempted to apply the chokehold once more. This time found an opening, reversed their positions and pinned Seong-sik down, unleashing a relentless barrage of punches. When one of Seong-sik's lackeys tried to intervene, Yoonhee, revealing unexpected fighting prowess, kicked him away. Seong-sik, stunned, called for a timeout. Yoonhee, who had previously only offered strategic advice, proved to be a powerful fighter in his own right, ending his part of the skirmish with a clean spinning kick. The fight then resumed between and Seong-sik, who targeted Um's arm in an attempt to break it. Despite screaming in agony, stubbornly rose to his feet and turned the tide once more, mimicking Yoonhee's technique to land his own spinning kick. The arrogant Seong-sik was finally and completely defeated. Issued a final warning to the other bullies to never again act like thugs within the school. Almost overnight, the quiet transfer student had become the unspoken king of the school. Yoonhee was ecstatic that the era of bullying was over, but felt a profound internal conflict. He had become addicted to the adrenaline rush of violence, a dependency so severe it now invaded his thoughts during crucial exams at his cram school. When a teacher poked his forehead to refocus him, chose to resist, leading to his expulsion from the class and another furious confrontation with his nearly violent father, which left his mother heartbroken. In a final pivotal moment, Yoonhee showed him a viral video of a brutal bullying incident. The perpetrator was Nam Hyub, a junior from another high school who was seen mercilessly tormenting a weaker boy. Thanks to his father's influence as a prominent medical school professor, Nam Hyub's malicious actions were consistently covered up. Yoonhee proposed that he and partner to deliver their own form of justice. Just then, a call from Um's father interrupted them. Yoonhee, in a bold move, snatched the phone and told to stop allowing his father to control his life. A furious nearly struck his friend. However, their argument was interrupted by a stranger, a boy who emerged from a nearby convenience store and sincerely thanked for his actions. Because had defeated the school's bullies, this boy and others like him were no longer victimized. Yoonhee clarified didn't do it for others, he just wanted to let out his own stress. That evening, Um's father took him to a high society party, instructing him to make a favorable impression. Obediently complied, politely greeting a professor who encouraged him to pursue medical school. The professor then introduced his son and instantly recognized him. It was Nam Hyub, the bully from the video. Ironically, Nam Hyub was in the midst of bragging about designing a charitable app for students with disabilities, presenting himself as a philanthropist while secretly being a predator who targeted the vulnerable. Consumed by anger, publicly exposed Nam Hyub's involvement in school violence, causing a scene that forced his father to drag him away. Outside, his father lectured him on the cold, complicated realities of the world, and demanded an apology to the professor's son. Pushed to his limit, retorted by asking if his father wanted him to end up like his late brother, a comment that earned him a sharp slap across the face. Sitting alone in the pouring rain, consumed by thoughts of his arrogant father and powerless mother, made a monumental decision. He sought out Yoonhee and finally agreed to join his crusade against the bullies who operated with impunity. That very night, as Nam Hyub continued his reign of terror at his own school, two figures appeared wearing red masks. And Yoonhee had adopted the mantle of vigilantes, self-proclaimed high school heroes who had declared war on the thugs plaguing their world. While Yoonhee skillfully handled Nam Hyub's lackeys, stepped forward to face the strongest fighter of them all, Nam Hyub himself, ready to deliver the justice the system had failed to provide. Having meticulously analyzed his opponent's techniques, Yui summoned the boxing combinations he had learned from his previous encounters and launched a counterassault. However, his rival Nam Hyub was a practiced Muay Thai expert, whose devastating knee and elbow strikes allowed him to quickly seize control of the confrontation. Observing the dire situation, Yoonhee efficiently dispatched the two lackeys who were with him and sprinted to his partner's aid. Nam Hyub attempted to ensnare Yoonhee with the same clinching tactics, but Yoonhee's inherent quickness and agility made him an elusive target. After this brief but crucial intervention allowed Yui a moment to recover, he steeled himself to face the formidable adversary once more. In a decisive climax, Yui channeled all his remaining strength into a powerful spinning kick that finally ended the brutal contest. With the fight concluded, Yoonhee forced a dazed and defeated Nam Hyub to offer a humiliating apology to the young victim whose bullying had been captured on video. He then turned to the victim and imparted a piece of his own vengeful philosophy, suggesting that the most effective path to healing was to retaliate directly, to return every smack and every hit in equal measure. Throughout this scene, Yui stood as a silent observer, documenting the entire exchange on his phone. Later, to mark their victory, Yui and Yoonhee shared a quiet moment drinking beer together, toasting what they considered the successful debut of their self-styled high school hero persona. That same night, Yoonhee paid a somber visit to his friend, Jeong, who lay in a hospital bed in a deep coma. The tragic event that had led to this state occurred 3 years prior, when Jiang was subjected to a vicious assault by Nam Hyub and 3 other bullies. This profound loss and thirst for retribution were the very reasons Uni had sought out a partner like Ui, seeing in him the strength needed to exact revenge on Nam Hyub. Standing by his friend's bedside, Uni renewed his vow, swearing to make the remaining unpunished bullies kneel in contrition. In a faint, almost imperceptible sign of life, Jiang's hand twitched slightly just as Uni departed. Yui's reputation as someone not to be trifled with was now cemented throughout the school after he had defeated the top 3 bullies. Meanwhile, Sheng Jun, having witnessed the destructive cycle of violence, made a conscious decision to distance himself from his former troublemaking associates and dedicated himself wholly to disciplined boxing training. In a moment of unexpected camaraderie, he offered Ui a piece of solemn advice, warning him that those who depend solely on their fists would inevitably find themselves destroyed by them. At the time, however, Ui was not in a state of mind to grasp the deeper meaning behind this warning. The school's delicate ecosystem was disrupted once again by the arrival of a new transfer student, Gail J., who was placed in the senior class. He inadvertently crossed paths with the still-recovering Sung Sik, who saw the new student as an easy target and attempted to extort a weekly payment from him, threatening a beating for non-compliance. Sung Sik, however, had once again gravely misjudged his mark. Gail J. proved to be remarkably nimble, effortlessly evading every clumsy attack and making Sung Sik appear utterly foolish. Thoroughly humiliated and defeated, Sung Sik concocted a deceitful scheme to save face. He dispatched a messenger to falsely inform Ui and Uni that a new, arrogant transfer student was aiming to seize control of the school. The 2 vigilantes, falling for the ruse, summoned Gail J to the rooftop for a confrontation. Gail J calmly explained that he had no interest in fighting and that Sung Sik was the instigator. Yet Ui, blinded by self-righteous fury, launched the first attack. To his shock, he found himself unable to gain any advantage over the composed newcomer. It was Uni, upon seeing Gail J's distinctive name tag, who suddenly recalled the legends surrounding him and his former school. He immediately intervened, stopping the fight and apologizing for their grave error. Gail J accepted the apology but offered a sobering perspective, suggesting that their seemingly righteous actions could be perceived as another form of evil, as no one held the ultimate authority to definitively label who the true bad guy was. Later, Uni elaborated on the infamous and mysterious Mumyang High School, from which Gail J had transferred. This institution was a government experiment, a place where the most problematic teenage offenders from across the region were gathered. Rather than enforcing discipline, the teachers there tacitly encouraged fighting, operating on a brutal principle where only the very strongest could survive and earn their way out. It was clear that Gail J had been the top contender in such a merciless environment. As Uni was enthusiastically recounting this story, they spotted a group of bullies tailing Gail J. They watched as Gail J led his pursuers into a secluded alley and reiterated his desire to be left alone, to simply not exist within the school's social hierarchy. Sung Sik, however, was only concerned with reclaiming his dignity in front of his followers. In a matter of seconds, Gail J effortlessly and brutally incapacitated the 2 bullies. Uni, seizing the opportunity, secretly filmed the entire display of skill. He then approached Gail J, pleading with him to agree to provide assistance on a future occasion when needed. Feeling somewhat cornered, Gail J reluctantly agreed to this unbalanced deal. Back at his cram school, Ui found himself deeply troubled, puzzling over Gail J's words about the ambiguity of good and evil. He returned home in a state of confusion, only to be met with a hard slap from his father, who was enraged by Yui's failing test scores and skipped classes. In an unprecedented act of defiance, Yui's mother screamed and physically intervened, shielding her son and demanding that her husband cease his relentless pressure to study. The intense domestic quarrel left Ui feeling emotionally suffocated and desperate for an outlet. He soon found one. A vulnerable boy was being blackmailed for money by a group led by Kian, who was, unbeknownst to himself, Uni's second designated target for revenge. The self-proclaimed high school heroes descended on the scene, initiating the fight with their signature cool spinning kick. They proceeded to kick the bullies into a sandpit, mockingly offering them a nice place to rest. The victims, watching the scene unfold, were so stunned they recorded it on their phones. During the confrontation, Ui seemed to lose all self-control, his punches growing progressively more savage and violent, as if he were purging all his pent-up stress and domestic anguish onto Kian. Uni, recognizing that his friend was crossing a dangerous line, tried to pull him back. Ui, however, snarled that such bullies deserved to die. Ultimately, a final shred of inherent kindness held him back from committing an irreversible mistake. Afterwards, Uni confronted Ui, telling him he had gone too far and nearly crossed a line into genuine criminality. A defensive UI retorted by asking if that very outcome wasn't what Uni had ultimately wanted from their partnership. Their argument was cut short by a phone call that sent Uni rushing back to the hospital. There he was met with a miracle. His friend Jiang was awake. Overwhelmed with emotion, Uni wept, his focus now sharpening on the two remaining bullies who had yet to face justice. Back at Yui's home, a different kind of conflict erupted. His father began clearing out the room of Yui's deceased older brother, intending to remove any distractions from his sole remaining son's studies. This act provoked Yui's mother into a furious outburst. She screamed at her husband, accusing him of caring only about academic rankings and of being completely blind to the bruises that marred their son's face. The father was visibly shocked by this accusation. The confrontation escalated when Yui returned home and his father demanded he hand over his brother's broken Walkman. Yui refused, clutching the device as his most sacred treasure, a final link to his brother who had once told him that with headphones on he could escape to a world without their father. The father showed no remorse, instead criticizing his late son for being weak. This finally broke Yui. He shattered the family's silence, screaming that his parents with their relentless pressure had killed his brother. He revealed how his brother, buckling under stress, had once hit him, and confessed that he himself was now obsessed with fighting as a way to release his own parallel torment. He described himself as a plane searching for freedom, with his father being the one who was causing it to crash. That night, the high school heroes embarked on their third act of revenge. Uni cautioned Yui to remain calm and to remember that they were not like the villains they pursued. However, upon entering the building where their targets were located, Yui's eyes gleamed with a disturbing excitement. They had been provided with information from another victim of school violence, but the situation quickly turned perilous. They were vastly outnumbered and their opponents were armed, leading to the two friends being quickly overpowered. Their masks were torn off and their leader, Doyle, recognized Uni, realizing this was an act of revenge for his hospitalized friend. With no other options, Yui and Uni smashed a window and made a desperate escape, pursued relentlessly by the gang. Luckily, Sheng-jun happened to be riding by on his motorcycle and swooped in to rescue them. A terrified Yui begged Sheng-jun to let him stay the night, fearing that returning home in his battered state would mean certain punishment. Sheng-jun took Yui to his gym, where the sight of numerous boxing trophies finally revealed to Yui the true extent of Sheng-jun's skill and dedication. Sheng-jun shared his hard-won wisdom, urging Yui to stop associating with bad influences. He confessed that he, too, had initially found fighting thrilling, but over time it had become a destructive habit that nearly ruined his future. Sheng-jun's heartfelt words had a profound effect, and Yui gradually began to calm down, redirecting his focus toward his studies. However, the world of violence did not cease simply because Yui chose to step away. The three bullies he and Uni had defeated sought out the school's most notoriously powerful fighter, Q, for help. Nam Hyub among them promised a significant financial reward for dealing with the vigilantes. Tempted by the money, Q agreed. He began his search for Uni with casual, intimidating inquiries. When Sung-sik arrogantly questioned him, Q responded not with words but with a violent kick, followed by a brutal one-handed beating that left Sung-sik disoriented and with a broken leg, a clear demonstration of his prowess. Having established his dominance, Q then sent his lackeys to summon Uni. When Uni and Yui arrived, Q greeted Uni with a deceptively warm smile. Yui immediately removed his headphones, ready for a fight, but Uni stopped him, insisting that this confrontation was his alone to face. He then recounted the traumatic events of 3 years prior, how he and his friend Jiang had refused to become lackeys for the bullies and shake down younger students, a decision that resulted in a savage beating. Even covered in bruises, the two friends had tried to maintain their spirits with jokes and laughter. The persecution, however, did not end. They were cornered again and told to pay protection money. Uni gave up all his cash, but Jiang defiantly refused, becoming the bullies' punching bag. In a moment of cowardice, Uni chose to save himself and ran away, only to be overwhelmed by guilt halfway home. He turned back, but it was too late. The bullies had already pushed Jiang down a flight of stairs. From that day forward, Uni had sworn vengeance. Now facing the immensely powerful Q, Uni stood no chance. Q landed heavy blows and mocked him with cruel taunts. Yui could not bear to see his friend so humiliated and shouted for Q to stop. Q merely sneered and threatened to permanently finish Uni. Enraged, Yui charged at Q. Initially, Yui was completely outmatched, yet a strange phenomenon occurred. The more hits Yui absorbed, the stronger and more determined he seemed to become. Q, recognizing this alarming resilience, decided to end the fight seriously. With one powerful kick, he broke Yui's arm. As Yui screamed in agony on the ground, Q showed no mercy, picking up a guitar and aiming it at Yui's leg. Just in time, Gale J appeared and commanded him to stop. Knowing he was no match for Gale J, Q reluctantly backed down, but not before snatching Yui's precious Walkman as a trophy, a clear signal that their war was far from over. Gale J coldly told Uni that they were now even and to leave him alone. On the verge of losing consciousness, Ui was flooded with painful memories of his brother Sakyo. He recalled how his brother had also been beaten by their father and forced into endless studying. Their father's justification was a desire for his sons to live a life free from being looked down upon. Under this immense pressure, Sakyo had taken out his frustration on a younger, weaker Ui, only calming down when he removed his own headphones. When their parents had finally noticed Sakyo's profound distress, their only advice was to endure it for the sake of upcoming college entrance exams. Sakyo eventually gained admission to medical school as they had wished, but soon after confessed to his mother his desire to drop out. Just as before, his pain was ignored and his father responded with yelling and insults. One night, Sakyo sat on Yui's bed and gave him his most beloved Walkman, repeating that the headphones were an escape to a world without their father and apologizing for the pain he had caused. Soon after, Sakyo ended his own life. Ui awoke in a hospital bed to the sound of his father shouting, demanding to know who was responsible for his son's injuries and vowing to make them eat prison food. Ui calmly identified Nam Hyub. He then posed a challenging question to his father, asking if he truly had the courage to send Nam Hyub to prison, knowing it would jeopardize his business dealings with Nam Hyub's father, a powerful hospital director. His father fell into a telling silence. That night, a deeply troubled Ui saw a vision of his brother and followed it to the rooftop, seemingly ready to make the same final choice. His mother, noticing his absence, frantically ran upstairs and found him. Ui, looking utterly exhausted, told her he finally understood his brother's suffering. His mother broke down, crying and apologizing, admitting that her own greed and compliance had hurt both of her sons. The weight of her guilt was crushing. In the end, Ui chose not to follow his brother's path. His mother held him tightly and promised to become a better parent from that day forward. His father, however, remained stubbornly entrenched in his worldview. He announced plans to send Ui to study in the United States. This time, Yui's mother stood her ground, defiantly stating that she would not let anyone hurt her son ever again. At school, Sheng Jun confronted Uni, blaming him for corrupting a model student and leading him into a life of fighting. Uni was racked with guilt. He went to the hospital to visit Jiang and poured out his self-blame, believing that his own cowardly flight had led to Jiang's tragedy. Jiang, however, revealed the true sequence of events. After Uni had run away, the bullies had placed a bet on whether he would return. The one who lost the bet had then gone to drag Uni back, and it was Jiang who had stepped in to protect his friend. The bullies had only meant to scare him, but their actions tragically went too far. Jiang assured Uni that he had never harbored any hatred for him and was, in fact, grateful that Uni had come back for him. Meanwhile, Q, seeking to eliminate a potential threat, gathered a group of fighters to ambush Gale J. A violent confrontation was inevitable. Even while severely outnumbered, Gale J displayed his incredible skill, managing to hold his own. However, one assailant attacked him from behind and another slammed him to the ground, dislocating his arm and leaving him dizzy. Fighting with just one functional arm, Gale J still managed to defeat the remaining lackeys. Then, in a profoundly shameful display, Q, who had waited until Gale J was at his most vulnerable, challenged him to a one-on-one fight. Despite being critically injured, Gale J continued to fight valiantly. In a final dirty trick, Q pretended to pass out, and the moment Gale J let his guard down, Q landed a sucker punch that ended the fight. Witnessing Gale J's severe injuries filled Uni with fury, but Gale J simply stated that he had got what he deserved, explaining his belief in a law of conservation of violence. That violence inevitably returns to the one who initiates it. He then asked about Yui's whereabouts. Uni, unsure how to respond, was left with a deep sense of guilt, intensified by the sight of a plane in the sky and Yui's empty seat in the classroom. He reflected on the days they had spent together punishing bullies and realized that Ui had become his most precious friend. Driven by this loyalty, Uni went to confront Q alone, demanding the return of Yui's Walkman. Q set a condition. Uni could have the Walkman back if he could defeat him. Uni attacked without hesitation, landing several impressive kicks, including a powerful spinning kick that injured Q's face. Enraged, Q unleashed his full power, brutally punishing the wannabe hero and leaving Uni bruised and utterly exhausted. Q ended the fight by returning the favor with his own spinning kick. However, in a surprising turn, he chose not to inflict further damage. He handed over the Walkman, stating that a boy who fought with such heartfelt determination for his friend had earned his respect. During this time, Ui and his mother had moved into a hotel together. True to her word, she encouraged him to pursue his own interests. Over a meal, she reminded him to invite Uni over and even asked if there was a girl he liked. For a brief shining period, Ui transformed into a bright and cheerful boy, openly chatting with his mother about his life and friends. This happiness was tragically short-lived. His grandfather, leveraging his connections, orchestrated a scheme where police and doctors were called. He falsely claimed that his daughter-in-law was mentally unstable and unfit to care for her son. Yui could only watch in helpless despair as his mother was taken away. In his eyes, it was his father and grandfather who were truly unwell, their obsessive drive for success having already ruined one son's life and now shattering what remained of the family. At this lowest point, Uni called. Ignoring all risk, Yui jumped out of his father's car and ran to his friend. Uni, having heard rumors of Yui's impending departure for abroad, had managed to retrieve the Walkman. He proudly announced that he had followed a YouTube tutorial to repair it himself. After a heartfelt goodbye, he turned to leave. Watching his friend walk away, Yui was overwhelmed with emotion. He put on the headphones and pressed play. As the music filled his ears, he experienced the profound feeling of being truly alive, just as his brother had once described. The next morning, Yui's father arrived at school to collect him, but Yui was not there. He was standing outside Kyu's school, waiting for the final confrontation. The last battle commenced. Even with his arm in a cast, Yui charged with feral intensity. Kyu, however, with his vast street fighting experience, effectively neutralized his attacks. Enraged after Yui managed to land a hit on his face, Kyu fought back with renewed ferocity, mocking Yui, saying they were both just broken trash. This verbal jab struck a deep chord within Yui. He suddenly burst into manic laughter, shouting that he was nothing like Kyu. The two then engaged in a fierce, desperate struggle until Yui smashed his heavy cast directly into Kyu's head, a devastating blow born from pushing a model student beyond his limits. Even then, Kyu continued to provoke him. Yui finally snapped, his mind flashing through images of his tormented brother, his tyrannical father, and his own timid former self. He channeled all this pain, pressure, and rage into a final, furious assault. As he put his headphones on, ready to deliver what seemed like a finishing blow, Yuni's voice rang out, stopping him. His father, who had arrived on the scene, stood in shock, demanding an explanation. Yui offered no verbal reply. Instead, he turned on his Walkman. The music brought back the memory of his oldest, simplest dream, not to become a doctor but simply to enjoy the freedom of the blue sky and white clouds. At that very moment, a plane flew overhead. Yui landed one final, decisive blow on Kyu. For the first time in his life, he felt truly, completely free. In the end, Yui did not go to the United States. He instead transferred to the infamous Mamyang High School. He shared a heartfelt hug with his mother and offered a distant formal bow to his father before boarding the bus alone. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out. Uni had decided to face the unknown future alongside his best friend. When they arrived at Mamyang, the reality of the place was immediately clear. A teacher used physical force to push new students off the bus. This was the mysterious institution where only the top 10 fighters could earn their freedom. As the heavy school gate swung open, Yui's eyes, rather than showing fear, were alight with a grim excitement. In this brutal environment, he could at last live without the fear of his father's shadow and, for better or worse, be his true self.